that were of Paul's company departed and came unto Caesarea. And after those days we took up our carriages and went up to Jerusalem. Then Paul took the men the next day, purifying himself with them, entered into the temple. And when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews which were of Asia, when they saw him in the temple, stirred up all the people and laid hands on him. So Paul is getting in trouble here in the temple, for they had seen before with him in the city Trophimus, an Ephesian, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple, which he had not, but they supposed it, and all the people got stirred up. And all the city was moved, and the people ran together, and they took Paul and drew him out of the temple, and forthwith the doors were shut. The Gentiles were not allowed in the temple itself. And there was a low wall that marked the dividing line. And signs were placed there in Greek and Latin that warned the Jews. And they said, "No foreigner is to enter. Whoever's caught will have himself to blame for his death which follows." We know that's true because they found a couple of these, and they are in museums today, dating back to Paul's time. These signs were posted on the dividing walls, and so we see here the dividing wall, and Gentiles were not allowed to go any closer to the temple than that. Not allowed to enter the temple, not the outer court or the inner court. Here are the walls. This is the model of the temple of Jesus' day, Herod's temple, at the Israel Museum. A fantastic model. And there's the dividing wall. Gentiles not allowed to go farther in. So here we see another reconstructive drawing. The court of the Gentiles was out. So here's the whole Temple Mount here. The whole Temple Mount with the Antonia Fortress up to the north, attached to the temple to the north. And the temple in the center of the Temple Mount, the temple itself. And outside of that was called the court of the Gentiles. That Gentiles were allowed in that area, but not in the temple. As they went about to kill him, tidings came unto the chief captain of the band that all Jerusalem was in an uproar, who immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down unto them. When they saw the chief captain and the soldiers, they left beating of Paul. They were wailing into him, wanting to kill him. The chief captain rescued Paul from the mob. The soldiers, the Roman soldiers, lived in the Antonia Fortress to the north end of the Temple Mount. And so the soldiers ran down unto them, which means they came down from the fortress. And when he came upon the stairs, so it was that he was borne of the soldiers for the violence of the people. So they literally picked Paul up and were carrying him back to the fortress. And as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, "May I speak unto thee?" Paul said, "I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, a citizen of no main city, no small city. And I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto the people." And when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs and beckoned with the hand to the people. So here is the situation. As we know from history, Josephus, and also from archaeology, there were stairs that led down from the fortress to the temple area. And so they carried Paul up those stairs back toward the fortress, and he was standing up there on the top of the stairs before going into the fortress somewhere here. Paul gave the account of his conversion to the people, and they listened silently. When they heard him speak in Hebrew, they became very quiet. And then they listened, and then he said that Christ commanded him to go to the Gentiles. He said unto me, "Depart, for I will send thee far hence unto the Gentiles." And when Paul said that Christ told him to preach to the Gentiles, they went mad. They gave him audience unto this word, and then lifted up their voices and said, Away with such a fellow from the earth. It's not fit that he should live. And as they cried out and cast off their clothes, threw dust into the air. They had a conniption. That's called a conniption. Paul was kept in, that's what the pro-abortionists are having right now, a conniption. Paul was kept in custody in the fortress. They carried him in, they protected him. A couple days later, it was learned that a plot had been made on his life. 40 Jews vowed not to eat or drink until they killed Paul. And that was approved by the Jewish council, by the Sanhedrin itself. Vowed they would not eat or drink until they killed Paul. He called, and it was made known to Paul about that. It was made known to him that that plan existed. And he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, Make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea. So Paul called the captain, told him about the plot to kill him. And so the captain is going to send him over to Caesarea. And he did it with a mighty military contingent. He called unto him 2 centurions, saying, Make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea. So there is the definition of a centurion. The officer over 100 soldiers. So 2 centurions, 200 soldiers. And horsemen, 70. And so 70 cavalry. And spearmen, 200. And so this captain is going to make sure that Paul gets to Caesarea safely, and provide them beasts that they may set Paul on and bring him safe unto Felix the governor, who lived in Caesarea. Then the soldiers, as it was commanded them, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. So here we go up from Jerusalem, part way, and on the morrow they left the horsemen to go with him and returned to the castle. And Paul was incarcerated in Caesarea for 2 years. 2 years. We've looked at that great city in some detail. At Caesarea, Paul appeared before Felix, Festus, and King Agrippa. His life was totally under God's control. God was totally in control of all of that. And he was there as God's witness before the nobles of Rome. They wouldn't come hear him preach, so God took him over there to witness to them. In man's eyes, it appeared that Paul was on trial, but in reality, Paul was the ambassador of Jesus Christ. It was those judges that were on trial before God as they were confronted with the claims of Christ. They failed the test. Paul first appeared before Felix. He was the governor of Judea. He lived there at Caesarea. And as to his personal life, he was grossly immoral. At the time of his appointment to be governor of the province of Judea, he was the husband of 3 royal ladies. While in office, he fell in love with Drusilla, who was married to Azizus, king of Emesa. So he was a filthy man. He went from woman to woman. Paul spoke before Felix and Drusilla, his illegitimate wife. Paul next appeared before Porcius Festus, appointed governor of Judea by Emperor Nero. Very little known about him other than what we see in the Bible. Finally, Paul appeared before Agrippa and Bernice. And that's Herod Agrippa II, grandson of Herod the Great, son of Herod Agrippa, who killed James, the brother of John. This is the man that was later eaten of worms. Agrippa I was the one eaten of worms. Agrippa II grew up in Rome and was a favorite of Emperor Claudius, personal friend of Josephus, the historian. He was king over the territory northeast of Judea. He lived in the palace in Caesarea Philippi, not Caesarea on the coast, Caesarea Philippi. We've seen that. Reconstructed drawing of Herod Agrippa's palace, Caesarea Philippi. And so Paul made a journey to Rome, in the closing chapters of the book of Acts. When it was determined that we should sail in Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners unto one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus' band. And entering into a ship was we launched, meaning to sail by the coast of Asia. One Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, being with us. Paul embarked for his journey to Rome from Caesarea's magnificent harbor. This reconstructive drawing shows what he would have seen that day. 100-acre man-made harbor, greatest engineering wonder of its time. That's what it's been called. Built by Herod the Great. It was remarkable even if judged by modern standards. It's been studied a lot in recent times. A lot of research has been done into it. Looking south from the harbor, this reconstructive drawing, the kind of things Paul would have seen. It was a magnificent city on the beautiful Mediterranean. That harbor was constructed of cut stones as well as synthetic blocks made with hydraulic cement that hardened underwater. The Romans invented that. But they would pour that hydraulic cement into these forms, and they were towed into position and sunk in the proper place to build that artificial harbor. That hydraulic cement was made of lime and rubble mixed with volcanic ash from around Mount Vesuvius in Italy, a Roman invention. The breakwater sea wall supported a stone platform that encircled the harbor, except for the entrance for the ships. And this formed a promenade for passengers, and then the loading and offloading of goods facilitated that. The harbor was designed to resist sedimentation. It had a mechanism of flushing, a flushing system. The harbor was bustling, merchants, naval ships coming and going all the time. Trireme galleys, 2 banks of oars, war galleys. The next day we touched at Sidon. So Paul leaves Caesarea, sails up the coast to